everyone. If you saw our last video, welcome back. And if you're a new viewer, we hope you can stay and join us in our future videos. We are the Education and Prevention Department at the Bridge Over Troubled Waters. And again, this is our Teal Table Talk. We're wearing teal to support survivors of sexual assault, sexual violence. Today is April. Well, all month is April, which is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and that's why we're wearing teal. Jessica?
Yeah, so my name is Jessica, and my lovely colleague who got us started off is Daniela.
And I'm Victoria.
And so today, I know one thing that we talked about last time is that sexual violence happens at alarming rates, right? And one thing you might be wondering is, why does sexual violence occur in our country at such alarming rates? And so what we're going to be talking about today is how we live in a society that normalizes sexual violence, that condones sexual violence. And so another word for what we use in the field to describe this, or what you might see this described as in the media or on social media, is rape culture. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is a few of looking at how rape culture presents itself. And then one key point that I also want to make is today we're not going to talk about victim blaming. Victim blaming is a part of rape culture. It's a huge part of rape culture. But we're going to save that for a video on its own. So that will be next time. But today we're going to talk about some other things that is a part of rape culture. So who wants to get us kicked off?
So to kind of give examples, right, as to what rape culture is, where we see rape culture, let's think about, for example, on the media. We usually will see things like that on it. If we see it in songs, the way they talk about, if it is, for example, a woman, or how they're, explaining their body, and how there's just so much in there. I know we used to do an activity when we go to middle schools or high schools. We would do an activity where we would show them a magazine and what the words would say on these magazines. So it would be a woman, on there, and they would just say how to get a guy, or how to do this, and how they were just sexually objectifying this person. So that's an example of what we see when we talk about rape culture. I know there's more examples. I don't know if you want to go ahead and give some.
Yeah, so if we're talking about objectification of women, specifically their bodies, you can definitely see that in music, in a lot of music. How they refer to women's bodies as property, as that's my property, that I'm conquering her body. It's a competition, who can have the most women, and you can definitely see that in a lot of songs, in a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows, of course, or how they refer to cars as I don't know if you realize, but they call cars she, her, woman pronouns. So that's an example. Or body like a Coke bottle, again, objectifying women's bodies.
Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about, I think it's an important thing that we mention when we talk about music, when we talk about movies. I know I mentioned magazines. I don't know if anybody still looks at those, but that's just something that I wanted to mention. It's important for y'all to know too that we do listen to some of these musics, we do watch these movies, and it's not we're just oh, we don't watch any of this. It's just becoming aware of what we see as well. So it's not we're saying don't watch these movies or these are horrible. I mean, it's just one of those things of becoming aware about it. So also there's the thing where when we talk about rape culture is, what messages do we hear, right? The message that we hear all the time is, oh, don't get raped, right? That's the one that usually will get, thrown around a lot. Well, don't get raped. Well, there's so much that just comes within that message. But instead of saying don't get raped, why do we just say don't rape, right? So that's something that we in that message within itself has so much that we can just dissect from it. But yeah, that's just another thing that I want to mention, that the messages that we hear within rape culture as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times that message is so subtle, right? It's not necessarily direct. A lot of times, specifically girls learn how to prevent getting sexually assaulted. So what we call as risk reduction. So making sure you use the buddy system, make sure you walk in well-lit areas, make sure to carry mace, all of these things that girls and women need to do to prevent getting sexually assaulted. That conversation is often not had with boys or men, yet we know that boys and men do experience sexual violence. And then also, that's most of the end of the conversation when we think about preventing sexual violence. It has nothing to do with preventing someone, helping someone understand that it is not okay to sexually harm another person, to break another person's boundaries. One thing in schools that we also talk about when we look at consent is we talk about entitlement and rejection, and how oftentimes, specifically, boys and men are taught through media messages, kind of through rape culture, that boys and men are entitled to women's bodies, right? Because oftentimes women's bodies, like we said, are objectified. And so part of our conversations in schools is hey, every person has their own body and is entitled to their own body and has the right to set their own boundaries and limits. And we need to be okay with accepting rejection. That could probably be a whole nother conversation on here. But really looking at, we are not a society that works well with rejection. No one likes rejection. No one likes hearing no. But how do we normalize no and not take it personally? I think is a really important lesson that we need to have that plays a role in rape culture.
Yes, definitely. And then also how we talked about it's normalized in our society for men and boys to conquer and own women, and try to see who can get the most women. But it's also normalized and excused by our society by that simple phrase that we learned growing up, that boys will be boys. And no one really thinks about it, but when they're younger, little boys will get dirty, run in the mud, and then people will say oh, boys will be boys. But then that escalates later on to, it's just that phrase is now used for everything to excuse behaviors that shouldn't be excused. So when you add that in with objectification of women, that definitely increases our normalization of sexual violence.
Yeah, a good example to what Daniela just explained was, I believe it was a Stanford case with Brock Turner, and the judge said, oh, well, he has such a promising future, kind of just saying yeah, he did this, but he has such a promising future, he has such a it's just, he has so much to live for. So then they gave him such a short sentence, and that within that was just more of kind of the slap in the hand saying, oh, boy will be boy, but look, he has such a promising future.
Victoria, can you tell us, just in case folks who are watching the video don't know about that case, can you just tell us a little bit about what happened there?
Yes. If just a little bit of snippet about that case, you can always look up some more information. A little bit about, just a snippet about the case. So it was a case that happened in Stanford University, and it was where they were at a college party. And the victim, she actually got sexually abused behind a dumpster, and she was unconscious. So, and she was unconscious because of alcohol, but that's something that we even want to talk about within itself, right? Mm-hmm. People tend to think, oh, she was drinking, it was her fault. Well, in reality, it's when we talk about true consent, when someone's unconscious, they cannot give consent, right? And it doesn't matter in what state. Even universities sometimes excuse, oh, men drink, right? But when a woman drinks, a lot of the times they get blamed for what occurs to them, and that shouldn't be that way. That again is one of those things that's adding on to that rape culture. So that's what happened, and that's just a snippet. You can always look up that case to get way more information. What was her name? Because do I describe her?
Were they at a college party or were they out at bars?
No, they were at a college party.
It was a party.
It was a party.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out, do I describe her with just giving her name already?
She's open now, so since she wrote that book, I think she's okay with her name being
with her
out
name.
There.
Okay, because that's what I was I don't know, because I know at first she didn't describe, she didn't say her name. Okay, there's Survivor. She actually goes on to write a book, and she's phenomenal. She actually goes and does an amazing victim impact statement that explains all the effects that goes into the trauma of sexual violence. So yeah, and I know Daniela wanted to mention a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, so and this is some from personal experience in college. Actually, fun fact, a lot of sororities are not allowed to have parties themselves as a sorority, maybe unofficially, but not representing their sorority. Whereas fraternities are allowed to have parties, whether that's at their house or as as a fraternity openly, officially. So that's something that we don't realize that promotes rape culture. And of course, it's definitely unfair how sororities are not allowed to throw parties, but fraternities are. And it kind of makes you wonder, like, well, why is that? And again, the idea that boys will be boys. So.
And can you talk a little bit about, because I feel like we've had conversations before about what that then means for girls and women.
Yes. So, I mean, if you think about it, on college campuses, if you can't have your own party at the safety of your own home with your own boundaries, and you want to go out with your friends, what are the only other options? And that's to go to a fraternity party, which is, again, it's not the safety or comfort of your home. You're not sure what's there. You're not really sure what's in the drinks. And so, yeah, definitely, that's definitely unfair. You have to find other resources, so you go to a fraternity party instead of having your own party.
Yeah. And a lot of this idea, this mentality that some people might have, or maybe, just the thought of, oh, well, why did you go? Why do you have to go to a party? Or why do you have to do all that? Will kind of feed into a lot of the victim blaming that we hope to talk about in that next video. So we can really dissect what victim blaming is and what it really looks like. Because a lot of those thoughts we do tend to have. And I say we is because sometimes at some point in our life, it comes up. Right? So I'm not saying that, I'm not excluding me at all in any of this conversation, because I'm sure at some point in my life I probably thought that before I learned what rape culture really was, and kind of what victim blaming and how that plays into rape culture within itself.
Yeah, you make, Victoria, I'm sorry, I was just thinking, like, you make a really great point. Because think about rape culture, also thinking about rape jokes and how people minimize sexual violence. And in these videos, right, we want to make sure that people, we all make mistakes, right? We could ourselves in some ways perpetuate rape culture. So this isn't a video or a space for us to point fingers at people. This is really a space for us to say, hey, let's learn about this. How do we really start building a culture that is really rooted in consent, in safety, in healthy relationships and sexuality, instead of one of sexual violence? Because I remember hearing, rape jokes and feeling uncomfortable by them, but not doing anything about it. I didn't say anything. I didn't interrupt it. I probably even laughed at one point, right? But I remember it didn't sit well. But now I know better, right? Now I know there are ways, especially when it's my own friends or family members, that I can say, hey, that's not funny, right? Like, that does minimize sexual violence. I feel uncomfortable when you joke about that.
Yeah, I definitely remember growing up in high school and middle school hearing this specific joke, and when I would do groups in middle schools, I still hear this joke, and it's that joke that people say, like, oh, it's not rape if you like it. So, for example, like, if students were play fighting and then another student will call out, rape, and then they'll be like, oh, it's not rape if you like it. And that's something that I've seen as an adult, but I've also seen in middle school and high school, and it's still a joke now. And it might be, like, funny when we're younger and we don't know anything, but really rape jokes are never funny. And what it does is it's normalizing, and it's giving that fake myth that, like, oh, it's not rape if you like it, So I think it's important to identify those rape jokes and then tell our friends, like, that's not really a cool joke. You never know who's in the space and who might be offended by it. And also, even if survivors aren't in that space, you should never say it.
Yeah, and I think Daniela makes a great point in the fact that we don't know who's in that space, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of the times we might think that we know our friends, our families, or whoever is in that space, but in reality, we don't know what that person what anybody has really gone through. So we don't know how a comment like that can really affect them. I actually used to work with survivors here at the Bridge, and that would be comments that sometimes they would make, that they would make these comments and it would really affect them because they would think that they have a mentality about, oh, sexual violence, like, or rape jokes or whatever, like they didn't, so they're like, oh, they probably didn't care about them too much. So that within themselves made them not ever want to disclose that information because of that idea, or they have these beliefs, or they're gonna believe it's my fault, or they're gonna think that I liked, for example, I liked rape. So a lot of that plays into it too. So we never really know who's in that space. How Daniela mentioned, and I think that's something to think about as well. So we know this conversation was very heavy right now that we had, and it is a very heavy conversation. I know we mentioned it in the last video. If you made it this far, like, make sure you take care of yourself after watching this video. We're really big people on like, hey, having to take care of yourself, especially after these topics, because 1, we don't talk about them that much. 2, they're very heavy. And 3, there's a really good chance we know somebody who has gone through something like this. So take care of yourself, try to figure out what you need to do. Think about things that you enjoy doing and try to do that, right? If you want to get more involved, like, let us know in the chat, like in the comments, look up what our future events look like. Follow us on our social medias and stuff like that, or just reach out to us directly and see, hey, what can I do to get involved? Or hey, I want to know more information. Just let us know.
Yeah, and we definitely want to challenge you guys after listening to this conversation to see if you can identify any forms of rape culture that you are probably doing without knowing, or that you see your friends or groups doing. So maybe you're in a group chat and you see someone saying something inappropriate about someone, or sharing pictures that they shouldn't be sharing. Or maybe you see an event flyer with a woman's body. You know, sometimes club flyers have the picture of that model to promote their event. See if you can message them and see if they can change the flyer. So things like that. See what you can find in your social media, in your real life, that shows examples of rape culture, and see what you can do to reach out to them, to inform them and educate them.
And just know that we just really skimmed the surface in this conversation, looking at what rape culture looks like. We hope you will continue watching our videos. If y'all have questions about anything we talked about today, if you want us to dive deeper in any of what we discussed, please let us know in the comment section. We want to talk about what you want to hear about. You can also learn more, right? Obviously, like both my colleagues said, check out our website. We will be discussing these topics more in the future. Thank y'all so much for joining us today.
Bye.